The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Café. This is the United Podcast Network.
And welcome to the Writer's Block Podcast. I'm Mandra, and I believe everyone has a story to tell. What's yours?
I'm Debbie, empowering women to find a creative voice.
And I'm Shelley Devlin, inspiring you to find your way.
And I'm Mr. Jonathan, and I don't know where the mute button is on the board that I just hit.
Mr. Jonathan got us off to a rough start, but we have an exciting show today. We are streaming live on Facebook from the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. And today with us, we're going to play our own version of Good Cop, Bad Cop as we welcome Brian Casey, author of the book Good Cop, Good Cop, a health and wellness book written specifically for law enforcement. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show.
Yes, we're going to imagine we have a spotlight over your head so we can interrogate you.
Right. Brian is a police sergeant and directs an employee assistance program. He has a health degree in health education from the University of Minnesota and over 30 years experience working as a paramedic, EMS educator, and police officer. His personal experience with critical incidents and his work as a health educator have given him special insight into the health and well-being of public safety personnel. So welcome, and let's get this interrogation started, Brian. Why did you decide to write this book?
Is your seat hot?
Yeah, thanks.
You're in the hot seat.
Well, no, I'm feeling pretty good. Why did I write? I think if you're going to write a book, as you guys know, it's best to have something to say.
Yes, that's
That's what they say.
Very true. Yeah. A few words here and there.
Yeah.
I sort of disagree. I tend to not. I never know what I'm going to say.
Well, I felt like I had so much to say. I would try to message to the officers because of my work and because I recognized some of their need. I would go to roll calls a lot and have a message, and you only have about 3 minutes at best with those guys during roll call. Sometimes they're called out or whatever, and I just noticed I had way more to say that could be said in a roll call briefing, for example. And I've thought about these subjects for a long time: the health and wellness, the mental health issues, the emotional well-being, all that. So I put it all down in a book and compiled it that way. So,
And how long did it take you to do that?
Great question.
the actual writing in earnest, about 3 years on evenings and weekends.
Okay.
It was-
That
it
gives
was-
me
is
schedule.
that
Gives me hope.
Is that
Yeah,
a big
like
number?
it.
I don't know. It was.
Listen, I like that number.
It was.
Especially for your first book.
Yeah.
It was a lot of suffering. It was grueling.
Mhm.
It was grueling.
Oh yeah, it was.
Finding the time or the actual writing or both?
The storytelling came very easy.
Okay.
And I really enjoyed that. To fill out the book so it was comprehensive on all the subjects I wanted to touch, and the editing was pretty grueling. But
Did you edit yourself or?
my wife happens to be a indexer. Have you ever met an indexer?
I don't
No.
think I have.
She's been a professional indexer for 25 years and worked in publishing. So,
Your life is one big OCD bubble.
well, and so we did that.
We say highly organized. Yes. Yes.
We.
Deb, did you notice what's written
Yeah.
on the side of his book right here?
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
assuming that's a proof.
That's just the one that actually I started to dedicate it to somebody and I mucked it up. I just
Oh,
did,
so it's a typo in your, not in the book, but in
No,
your own
right.
signing?
So I trashed this book and I thought, well, this is what I'll keep track of any changes or. So I thought, well, I'll just bring this one as a way because I don't mind bending it. When I was running through the airport because of poor planning on the way here, my backpack opened up, all my books spilled out, including this one. So.
Oh, that's funny.
And then so I grabbed it all up and kept running. But yeah, so that's this is my first book, and as you might think, it would be nicer to publish the second edition first if you could do that magically.
Do you love that?
Why would that be nice?
Because you could say, I wish I wanted to said it that way, and you could fix it before the first edition. So there's a few, even though I hired professional editors and such,
and proofreaders, yeah.
we still missed a few things, and then there was a few things that I would like to say different or whatever.
But you found that when you,
Oh, Lord.
first put Well-Behaved Woman up,
Right.
right? And then there were some mistakes.
Yeah.
And you wanted to.
I think that out of a 220-page book, there were 66, which means every 3 pages that's unacceptable. So I pulled it down and had it fixed. But so it's never going to be perfect, and you can't go for that.
I actually enjoyed the editing phase. I actually love the craft of wording and rewording and rewording. I really kind of surprised myself how much I enjoy editing the phase. So that's
Well, that's kind of fun.
yeah, it is kind of fun, and then to have the professional editing as well,
Now,
because you want to write without too much restriction.
Right.
Exactly.
Who did your cover?
I love that cover.
I designed the cover.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Does Jonathan see that?
It is.
I've got a big copy. Of
Okay.
It's got. So that's actually my son in my uniform.
Oh, that's awesome.
And the reason is I took some prep photos first, and it looked like an old man in a police uniform.
Oh, and
you didn't want that message?
No.
That was the wrong message. We can't have
Good
that.
cop, old cop. That could
Yeah,
be
Not so
right.
inspiring.
So then I got my son, who's an accountant, and he's 27, and I think he's 27. It changes every year.
Yeah, it does.
And,
It's funny like that.
And he is strong and buff, and we had those temporary tattoos put on his knuckles because my son does not have neck or knuckle tattoos.
Not as an accountant, I wouldn't
No,
think.
and then that's my wedding ring on him. So
Oh,
I
why
think
the
that
wedding
is
ring?
so creative.
partly because the core message is about health and well-being. One of the big issues that all people struggle with sometimes is relationship issues.
The family.
Probably
Ah.
probably the number one in my work as the EAP director. Probably the number one issue that people come to me seeking help is not death and destruction on the job. It's struggling with teenage kids and marriage and family
Really?
issues. Yeah, so
just
that's
like everything else.
just like the rest of society. So
Well, except for producers and hosts, because of course they just have such a symbiotic, peaceful
I don't know if anybody's listened to the
relationship.
podcast before. Jonathan's a little quiet
She
today.
said with her voice dripping with sarcasm.
so I wanted that message to be in there as well.
Right.
And it's a funny thing in patrol work. I don't know if this fits. You approach strangers for a living. That's what a police officer does. That's why it's even different than other public safety jobs. You approach strangers for a living, and you don't know what they hide in their brain or their waistband
Right.
or their whatever. And I remember even as a patrolman, if you saw someone with a wedding ring on, it was kind of part of the data that you took in about them.
Sure.
Like, okay, this
Wow.
person's life is organized enough,
That somebody,
that they're married and all that. So
Yeah.
so they're a little bit
It's a-
safer.
Yeah, it's a clue.
possibly,
Yeah.
It's just some of the data you take in, But anyway, so that's that, and that's how the cover came across. And then the good cop was a play on the words that you guys have already been teasing me about, being the bad cop. There's 3 of you, so they probably have to one
Yeah, you're
more.
outnumbered.
Was sometimes there's this false belief that 50% of the cops are good and 50% of the cops are bad or something like that.
Oh, I think of it as from the movies where
Well-
we agree, we're going to go in and interrogate. Okay, today I'm going to be the good cop.
That is the good cop, bad cop part. I guess I was thinking more about just that most cops are, I think, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts that grow into adulthood
Right.
and trying to do good. And then
great
finding out
analogy.
it's a lot harder than in reality than they initially thought. And one of the big encouragements I put in the book is that wasn't naive to desire that. It just was harder than they thought. And encourage them to find that they, many police officers do more good in a routine, boring day that they think they did nothing than many people that get a chance to do.
Right.
Just their physical presence, just the fact that they exist in the world is doing good.
Right.
But they often don't see that. Is that what you're saying? They don't see that and then jaded or down on
Exactly.
the job.
That's it's funny. The other night, 2 weeks ago, I was hit by a hit and run, and when the policeman came, I said to him, the thing that surprised me the most was when he hit me, or he took off really fast, and the cop smiled at me, and I said it never occurred to me that they wouldn't pull over because I was in the middle of the road in a car that I couldn't control, couldn't steer, and couldn't get out of because they had hit my door. And he looked at me with this funny look on his face, and he said, "Well, you must hang out with just nice people then." He said, "I'm not that surprised that they took off." And then at the end, I gave him a hug.
No.
And he was so big and buff. I mean, I get
boy, Jonathan. Okay, very.
I think he had a vest on. I observed that after the fact.
I'm sure.
'cause I
Yes,
thought nobody's
that was part
hard.
of the. It's like I better suit up. This was. Yeah.
We're going to have a little chat about that.
But I could see in his eyes that he was saying that's not the only. I don't just associate with the nice people like you.
Right.
And it was kind of, I thought, boy, I feel really lucky that I don't have to see that side of humanity very often.
Well, when he said that to you, did it make you? Was it offensive in any way? When
Oh,
he said
absolutely not. I took it as I'm very lucky, and I felt a sadness for him.
Interesting. So you felt sadness that he's exposed to so many. He has that cynicism about.
Yeah, he wasn't angry or aggressive about it. Just that he was kind of acknowledging that he sees a lot of the uglier side of people.
Right.
And he was, kind of a young man and very nice, and I was glad he was there helping me out of my car.
Sure.
So.
But he probably likes that, I mean, they would be bored with just nice folks all the time. So it's not interesting that he mentioned that to you, and that's absolutely true. Is that he gets to see the range of. I actually don't know a job where you go into more people's homes. Uninvited, so to speak, with them unprepared for you.
Right.
I mean, ambulance work, I did ambulance work for 20 years. We did that.
What kind of work is that?
Ambulance work. So I was a paramedic for 20 years before I became a police officer. And you go into homes and you see how they live, and you see the good, bad, and the ugly,
Right.
It's fascinating, actually.
Boy, would you ever write fiction?
I have another book that's 90% written that my wife insisted I stop writing that and write this book because this was so timely and needed.
Interesting.
And in that book, it's about ambulance work, and there is some things I fictionalized, and I was shocked at how well I lied. I guess I don't know. I made up things, and I thought, well, that's
pretty good.
That sure was easy to do, and I blended it with that because there was a number of reasons I couldn't.
Tell the truth.
Tell the exact story in the ambulance book. So,
like when they show up at Mandra's house the night and sorry.
You're thinking of police stories?
No.
My memoir, the ambulance,
trying to
embellish.
Embellish a little.
When she had to call the ambulance in the middle of the night.
Sure.
Yeah.
Brian, what does your writing process look like? When you are ready to write, are you just sitting down and it just comes to you, or do you?
Yeah, thanks. That's why I said it was kind of grueling. I treat it like labor. Like as a police officer, many police officers to make ends meet will work part-time jobs. I thought, I'm not going to work a part-time police in uniform job. I'm going to write a book. So I treated it like a job. I'd get up early, do weekends, evenings, just like a schedule. The one thing about me is that I write it all down. I was a EMT for 5 years while I was in college. I was a paramedic for 20 years as a career, and then I've been a police officer almost 15 years, and I've written it all down.
You mean you kept a journal?
Yep.
Or okay, so you had that to go back to.
All the sights, the sounds, the observations.
Wow.
And it wasn't with any intention to share it. It's just that I thought, oh my God, I got to capture this stuff.
Right.
So I have thousands of pages of
reference.
Of notes.
On my experience in public safety. And
So was this just selecting the ones that spoke to you the most, or?
So for this one, it was so I'm the director of an employee assistance program, an internal one. I mean, I'm a police sergeant at the St. Paul Police Department, and I work with officers that struggle with mental and emotional issues and all those things. The vast majority of the issues they have is what everyone in society has. Mm-hmm. And so then in that job, I had to get clarity about my best purpose and function and how to best to proceed. And then I started to see categories and start to frame up how officers' distress is. So I started to organize that and keep notes. And then I eventually turned it into an 11-chapter book that covers sleep issues and alcohol problems and purpose-centered policing. And the beginning is what I call cop think, how cops think and how their world is shaped a little bit. And then at the end, I take that cop think and flip it around and talk about the advantages of being a police officer. Because sometimes there's a lot of focus on the disadvantages. There's huge advantages in society to have that experience.
Such as?
Well, it's let me just, if you don't mind, let me just find it so I don't muck it up too bad. It's right at the end, and it says, well, bad airtime, I'm sure.
That's okay. We're going to read a little bit from Good Cop, Good Cop.
So here I talk about discerning. As a police officer, you get to discern the difference between good and bad, and you might even say good and evil. And we are fortunate to know there is a downside, a bad or an evil, because with this we realize there is an upside, a good. For those without this knowledge, where everything is relative, everything is flat, there is no hope. We live in hope precisely because we walk between good and evil. In fact, our daily lives, our daily exposure to bad can make us more aware of the good, even within ourselves. The line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human. That's not mine. That's, the Russian writer Solzhenitsyn.
Wow, he is good.
That's amazing.
I love that walk the hope.
And I had to add that because I'm talking about good cop, like, oh, all cops are good. No, all humans have good and evil within, right down the center of their heart.
And some people kind of lean one way.
So anyway, you had asked about my process. So my process is to gather up all this stuff and then weed through it to try to tell the story the best.
And then organize it into those 11
chapters. Right? Is it 11 chapters? I guess I should know answer. Yeah, 11 chapters. Oh, 12 chapters. So I skipped one.
So it's a reference book for your industry.
Exactly. And it's intended for public safety workers, including corrections officers and dispatchers and firefighters and EMTs and paramedics. The reason I focused on police officers is I was a paramedic for 20 years. And now I'm a police officer. I really feel that police officers, some of the need for some of this is the greatest, and they're the hardest audience to reach.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you make a broad message, it's hard to reach a specific audience. Because then police officers are like, oh, you're using the term first responder,
and they don't.
You're not talking to me,
right.
So I was very intentional about trying to speak to police officers, even though I've had others, even outside this industry, read the book and go, well, that's very helpful.
And be able to take something away from it, even if they're not.
Exactly. Yeah. And because there's, like in the alcohol chapter, I spent a lot of time talking about good supervision, which is actually life-saving.
Good supervision.
So, for example, you're familiar with a come to Jesus speech?
Yeah.
If I ever catch you doing this again, this is the last time. Well, if you have a substance use disorder, say you're an alcoholic, to use the older term, you're going to say, you're right, I'm a horrible human. I'll make my life right within 5 minutes that your first love is talking to you, right? Which is your substance use disorder. And so that you could even earnestly agree with that, warning from your supervisor, but the addiction is going to have you again. And so then there's just more self-loathing after that. So I'm more strategic with that stuff, meaning let's come up with a plan, let's work together, let's
kind of get into the
accurate
nitty-gritty
assessments.
You're
right. And don't rely on impassioned speeches to try to correct behavior and such.
Right.
Good supervision. And then the reason it's important is good supervision is because the one thing we can do is hold people accountable to work expectations. That's the one leverage you have. I mean, I can't make a cop go into treatment.
Right.
Because I can say, no, thank you. Mm-hmm. But my boss can fire them for not meeting work expectations. So it's just a different focus. I tend to, a lot of people say, oh, you're so empathetic. Oh, that's good, I guess. Some empathy is good. But I don't think that's necessarily why I'm successful. That's maybe why I'm approachable. But I'm more strategic. I mean, when an officer comes to me in distress, sometimes I'm sitting there listening and I almost get a smirk on my face because I'm getting excited for them. Because I'm thinking, how am I going to get you? How can we work together, get you farther down the road? I'm actually glad you're in distress, because how do humans know if they're not living their life right, or if they have the right goals but not going about them right, unless you have some distress? Mental and emotional distress is our friend.
Wow.
And it guides us.
Well, it's a cue.
It alerts us to that.
Yes.
The problem with police officers is they turn the pain volume down, because they just have so much exposure to pain, suffering, and death and destruction. And they actually need to. I mean, you don't want an
Right.
emotional police officer
At your
at
car accident, helping you out of the car.
Exactly.
Oh
You-
my God, this is terrible. No, just get me out of here.
Yeah, you want them to say, you must hang around good people all day, you know?
That's right.
You know, and so that
And
kind of,
everything's okay, and
that-
you want to calm.
that affect is super important. That's what they're projecting, you know, and I learned, I'm kind of a master at it. I learned it in ambulance work and then as a police officer, just to, because people take their temperature off you. One of my
Right.
favorite stories.
So if you stay calm, they stay calm.
Oh, if you let me, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a funny story. And this was as a paramedic, I had it. Like, say a child was struck by a car. All right, you get that radio. And I don't have that, paramedics don't have that reaction. That, oh my God, because sometimes they're just knocked over and they're fine. Sometimes it's terrible. So, and they don't need to invest a bunch of emotional energy into anticipating, right? Wow. So they arrive. And I remember riding around one, and there was a child struck by a car in North Minneapolis, and I could see out the window that the child was moving and such. So that's good, obviously. And the firefighters and police officers, God bless them, were all leaning over him, saying, "Don't be afraid. You're okay. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared." Because these men, you know, have children, and they don't like to see children suffer. And I would walk up to that kid and I'd say,
Get up.
No.
How you doing?
I'd look him right in the eye and I'd say, "You look really scared."
Oh.
So what I would do is validate their reality.
Yeah.
And then that kid would stop screaming and look me in the eye like, this is the only guy speaking English because I am scared.
Right.
And everybody telling me not to be afraid. What do you mean? I'm laying on the ground and I
Wow.
probably wasn't supposed to be in the street, you know? And so those are the type of skills, the craft of police
Right.
work and ambulance work is just...
What do you think, for those people who are listening, what do you think the big takeaway is from your book? Like, what will people get from reading it? Whether they are first responders, police officers, or...
Thank you for asking that. I think one of the big messages that I want is some of the distress that they are suffering. One, sometimes they brought to the job with them, you know, adverse childhood experiences.
or
But
kind
a
of their
big,
baggage?
yes,
Yeah.
and part of it is the neglect of their health and well-being. So
Wow.
it's easy, and I understand this, to go, I'm feeling my relationships aren't healthy, I'm not doing well, I'm trying to change how I feel by drinking alcohol. It must be because of that dead baby call I was on. Sorry to say it that way because that's a
Right.
crude way to say it. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it was also the fact that you made a number of bad choices, that you are neglecting your health. And the job is, police work, for
Right.
example, is you kind of have a ready-made identity. There's a lot of distractions so that you can ignore your health and well-being
Wow.
for a long time because it's so much fun and interesting and lively. And so one of the big message I have, and others have said I was somewhat successful with that, is their own responsibility to maintain health and well-being and attend to it.
Which
Right.
is really good for everybody.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Every
Definitely
person.
a good message.
Every person.
And don't
Yes.
take the low-hanging fruit of, I feel distressed, let me look around. Oh, it's
Right.
Oh, it's that
I
call,
need
it's that-
I need a
donut.
new wife.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Here,
Well,
here.
yeah.
Was that,
No,
was
but
my mic on?
you got one in.
Was that-
Good job.
Was that out loud?
No, but it's more to do the work, right? To do the work, the mental health work on yourself. And,
Exactly.
yeah. Where can we find you? Where can we find us?
Probably the best way is just to go to goodcop.com.
Okay.
And then it's on Amazon as well, but large orders can be made right through the publisher.
Okay. So goodcop.com.
Yep.
Okay. And that's Brian Casey. Brian, thank you so much for coming on today and talking with us. Please be sure to check us out at the Writer's Block NH Facebook and the Writer's Block podcast on your favorite podcast catcher. If you'd like to hear this episode again or share it with a friend, you can head on over to the UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv. That's UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv. Thank you again for listening, and we hope to inspire and empower you to tell your story.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Café, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.